All right. Hello and welcome to the Humboldt and Delaware County Master Food Preserver third Thursday presentation. Tonight we have the delight of learning from Margie Adler, one of our Master Food Preserver volunteers, learning how to make kombucha. The Master Food Preserver program is a volunteer program. Without our volunteers, we wouldn't be able to provide these educational opportunities for you. And our volunteers are trained through the University of California Master Food Preserver program, which is at minimum 50 hours of education and skill building. My name is Dorina Espinosa. I am also a Master Food Preserver and the coordinator of the Master Food Preserver programs in Humboldt and Delaware counties. And the Master Food Preserver program, as I've already shared, is a volunteer program that provides training, and in return for the training, our volunteers give back to the community, and these demonstrations are one of the ways that our volunteers give back to the community. The Master Food Preserver program mission is to teach research-based home food preservation and food safety skills and education to the residents here in the state of California, and some of you are visiting us from other states as well, so welcome. I'm grateful for the generous contributions of time and energy and expertise that our volunteers provide for our communities. And tonight, as I've already shared, Margie Adler will be teaching us how to make kombucha. During this presentation, we may mention products or brands. They are examples only. They are not being endorsed as products or brands by the Master Food Preserver program. Let's see. And then I want to also acknowledge the land on which this presentation is being given to you today. Many of our organizations were created on and created from land of several indigenous tribal nations. These lands were the traditional birthright of indigenous people who know the land and the creatures of the land and have the knowledge to sustain the land. Indigenous people have faced 2 centuries of struggle for survival and identity in the wake of dispossession. May we all begin to address our history to recognize our responsibilities to the people of these lands and undertake significant efforts at reconciliation. May this work guide the present and the future. Today's presenters are on the lands of the Wiyot tribe. The Wiyot people have lived in Humboldt Bay region for thousands of years. All right. So on that, I will give it up to our lovely volunteer, Margie Adler.
Thank you, Dorina, and hello, everyone. I'm really very excited to present on kombucha this evening. I think that the reason is because I'm so excited about it. I am very passionate about kombucha. I love it. I love making it. And I love sharing it with other people. And so I'm hoping that tonight's presentation will help make it feel more accessible to you. I hope that, as the title is Demystifying Kombucha, because I think that some of the vocabulary around kombucha is foreign for people, it's misunderstood, and people are a little bit afraid of it. I think that there are some things about it that are kind of off-putting. So I'm hoping that by watching me do all of this, you'll see how easy it is. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to do a first fermentation, which is your basic kombucha without any flavoring, and then we will move on to taking that first fermentation, and here's one that's already ready to become a second fermentation, and we will bottle it, and we will do some different flavorings and talk about how all that goes. And I'm very happy to take questions. whenever you have them. So as Dorina said, just go ahead and put them in chat and don't worry about interrupting. We'll stop multiple times to take questions and to have a little discussion. One of the things that Dorina asked me when we were chatting before you all got here is, she asked me if I was going to tell the story of how I finally made the move to making kombucha, because I was put off by it. I was a little nervous about doing it. I think that I was afraid that if I didn't do it correctly, that I would get, horrible things growing in the bottles. And, I thought that it was going to be very difficult to keep everything clean and safe and healthy. And that finally one day I just happened to walk into a friend's house, and he was he was going through the process. He had made his first ferment. He had made the sweetened tea to start the first fermentation, and he was also going to be bottling a fermentation that was ready to go to its second fermentation. And so I got to watch the whole process, and it just made it feel easier and more accessible and more understandable for me. So I'm hoping that the same thing will happen for you. So I'm going to show you today. This is what it looks like when it is just a plain original first fermentation. There's no flavoring in this, and I have this set aside to use for our the fermentation we're going to be making today. And then this is a bottle of that has been flavored with raspberries, as a matter of fact. And so this is what's called the second fermentation. And it's flavored and it's been put in the refrigerator. And I will open it up later and you'll see how fizzy it is, and we'll put it in glass. I wish that we were all in the same room so I could bring a lot of kombucha and we could all share some. We'll have to just imagine it tonight. So to begin, I think I'd like to just show you what's involved in doing the first fermentation. Dorina, I think that you have a picture of the pot on the stove with the tea bags in it. If you'd show that on the screen, that'd be great. Earlier today, I made the sweetened tea, and I did it. You have in your handouts, you have two ways to do it. One is a larger quantity, which is what I'm doing, and one is a smaller quantity. They're both basically the same. They're the same science. They're basically the same, similar methods, and they're both fine. The advantage to making a smaller amount of sweetened tea is because you will have a smaller quantity to cool, so it will cool faster. But there's nothing wrong with making a larger amount and just taking more time for it to cool, which is what I tend to do. So I will just show you that I have my pot on the burner. I used a large measuring cup, and I measured the water into the pot. I did 15 cups, and then I brought it to a boil. And when it came to a boil, then I took 1 cup of granulated sugar and I stirred it into the pot. Okay, I turned the heat off. I moved the pot off of the heat, and I took 5 tea bags, English breakfast tea, black tea, and I hung them on the side. And I think that you're probably seeing an image of that on your screen. So then I let that cool. So I just put it over here and I let it cool. It's perfectly cool to the touch now. And so it's safe for me to put it into my fermentation vessel, which is this glass jar. And normally I take it over to the sink to pour it in, but I'm going to very carefully do it here so that you can watch me. I go about halfway or more, and then I take the kombucha that I have set aside, the starter liquid. This is the starter. And I am going to pour that in. This is about a cup. A little tiny SCOBY just plopped in there. That's just because a little tiny SCOBY was made from the interaction of the sugar and the bacteria and the yeast in the bottle. There's nothing wrong with it going in there. And so now I'm going to take I'm just going to stir it gently, just a little bit.
Margie,
I'm sorry.
will you remind me how long you said you steeped the tea?
Yes, thank you for asking. I steep the tea for about 25 minutes. If you forget about it and you leave the tea bags in there longer, there's not going to be any problem. Okay, I want to make sure that I tell people that because it's happened to me and I'm sure it will happen to somebody else. But you set a timer. I set my timer for about 25 minutes, and then I take them out. So then what you have is the sweetened tea. And now I'm going to fill it pretty far up because I know about how much room I need to leave for my SCOBY, and I can always put more in. And now I'm going to introduce you to the SCOBY. Since I already have one here in this jar, I'm going to remove the top. And this will be a really good example. I'm going to just put my hands in some apple cider vinegar. You can also, if you want to, you could just use kombucha. And now here's my SCOBY. And this one has quite a lot of layers to it. I hope you can see it pretty well. Then there's a new layer that's been formed from this particular fermentation. And I can take part of it, or I can take the whole thing. You can peel part of it off if it's very thick and you don't want to use all of it. Or you can put the whole thing in. I'm just going to go ahead and take part of it off. And I'm going to put that right in there. Now you can try to put it in flat like a pancake, and they will sometimes roll to the side, and that's perfectly fine. I'll explain about the SCOBY Hotel in just a little bit. Okay, so now we have the sweetened tea and the SCOBY, and I'll remind you that the SCOBY is a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast, symbiotic, so it's mutually beneficial. And as long as it has the sugar to feed on and the caffeine from the tea, it's going to do great. So I think I'm going to put a little bit more in. I like to go pretty far up I figure if I'm going to all this trouble, I want to get as much out of it as I can. So that I have a lot to drink, and also so I have as much starter as I can get. So now that's it. That's your first fermentation. I'm going to take, I just use paper towels. Some people would use paper coffee filters, or you can use cheesecloth, but it has to be something that will breathe a little bit, but cover the top, and then just take a rubber band or some kind of a bungee or some kind of binder and bind it. And so now what I'm going to do is I've already prepared this, is I take just a little piece of scrap paper and I write down the date that I've done this fermentation. And that way I know when I want to start tasting it to see if it's ready for second fermentation. I also know in my mind if it's going to take, is it going to take 7 days, 10 days, 14 days, 21 days? So I like to keep track of that. So now I have, this fermentation is done. It's covered, it's dated, the SCOBY's in there. No, I'm not going to touch it for at least a week. And I know because of my experience for so many years of doing it in this particular kitchen, I know that mine will take at least 14 days. And that's partly because of my taste buds. And so it has to do with maybe your own taste buds, what the taste that you like. It also has to do with maybe the climate in your kitchen, how warm it is. And also if you have a pretty good dark space to put it in. So maybe we can talk about that. I just use a space on my counter that's under a cupboard. I'm going to walk it over there right now and put it in. And it's pretty dark there. It's not totally pitch black, but it's pretty dark there. So that's where I keep my fermentation. That's where I keep my my SCOBY hotel, my jar of SCOBYs. And that's where I keep my bottled second fermentation. So there's enough room over there and it's dark enough for all of that. And let's see, maybe now would be a good time.
Would this be a good time for questions, Margie?
Sure, we can take some questions.
Thank you. And these questions might be predating what you're about to talk about, but there's a few questions about the SCOBY. One,
Okay.
if there's instructions, another, the difference between the starter versus the SCOBY.
The starter is the liquid, and the SCOBY is this sort of gelatin-like substance that some people think they call it a mushroom. It's not a mushroom, it's not a fungus at all. It is exactly what it says, a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast, and it feeds off of the starter liquid and it feeds off of the sweetened tea when it's in the fermentation. So this is the SCOBY hotel, and so, or some people call it the SCOBY garage. You need to have a place to keep it. I generally have more than I need. I usually need 2 because I like to keep 2 fermentations going. But I also like to have some to be able to give away to people. And so if I have more than I need, then I sometimes will cut them up very finely and put them into compost or just mix them into compost and soil and use them out in the garden. But did I answer your question? The question, this is the SCOBY.
And did you start with any material, or is that all growth from the fermentation that you're holding right now?
Yes, what you will start with is a SCOBY and a cup of starter liquid. Or if you're making a smaller amount, then you only need a half cup of starter liquid. And your SCOBY can be smaller than this, or it can be bigger, but that's what you start with. And I'm going to, can you see it well from here?
Yeah, I'm wondering, and that is all growth from the
Yes.
first fermentation.
Well, this is not, this was from probably more than one fermentation, because I use my SCOBYs for a long time. They don't really go bad, so you can. Here's a small one. I'd like to show you this small one. This is a very small one, and sometimes you can start just with a small one like this. Or you might want to use a bigger one. A smaller one just might take a little bit longer for the fermentation to get to where you want it to go. But so this is what a very small one. Every time you do a fermentation in your vessel, you will get more SCOBY. Your SCOBY will grow, and so you can, even as you saw what I did, I peeled part of mine off, and I put part of it in the new fermentation, and I left part of it, whoops, here. So the SCOBY always will resemble this, but it does grow, and you can peel it off at any point. Can you see that it's very easy that you get layers? You see the layers?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So you can use as much of it or as little of it as you want. And if you're not using it, you put them in your SCOBY hotel, and you pour some liquid, some of the starter liquid, some of your kombucha. So some of what we do tonight, we're going to use this to do a second fermentation, the one over here on the left. But I'm also going to take off some of that as my starter liquid for my next brew, my next fermentation. And I usually take some of it and put it in my SCOBY hotel. Right now I have quite a bit in my SCOBY hotel, so I probably won't put any more in today.
Great.
So that's what you need. So if you want to get started, that's what you need to get from somebody, a friend, a SCOBY, or a SCOBY and some liquid. Now, some starter liquid. I do want to tell you that there are other ways to get a SCOBY and starter liquid. And one of the resources that I can give you is online. It's called Cultures for Health. And I checked, and they right now do have their live black tea kombucha starter culture. I believe it's $19.99. It comes with a SCOBY and a half a cup of starter tea. So you would be able to make about a quart. You can add more starter to make a gallon. And if you, let's see, another thing that I have done, not very often, but I have, if I needed more starter culture than I had, or if I needed more to put in my SCOBY hotel, I have gone to the store and purchased a high quality kombucha that is just a original. There's no flavoring at all. It's just the basic culture, the basic fermentation. And so you actually could use a cup of that, or half a cup, or whatever you need.
I have a few more
And
SCOBY questions if now's a good time.
yeah,
Let's see. So other people talked about placing a post on social media to get a SCOBY. This question is about the SCOBY hotel. What do you need to keep SCOBY? Do you add liquid or sugar to the hotel?
yes, you add some kombucha to it. You add, if you have, it's a good idea to add some of your kombucha from your first fermentation to it. I have quite a bit in here now. You want just enough in to cover it. And so I add it here and there. Another thing that you can do is just add some sweetened tea. So for example, in this pot, I have a little bit left over that I did not put in that jar. So if I wanted to, and I will do it, I'll just add a little bit of sweetened tea to that.
Do you refrigerate that, or do you keep that
No.
in a certain place, temperature or darkness?
Yes. Yes, this is called the SCOBY Hotel or the Garage. It gets covered with a binder or rubber band. I just use a paper towel, and I usually take the paper towel and I fold it in half and put it over, and then bind it with the rubber band. And that goes in that same dark place where I put my fermentation. That's where that goes.
Okay.
Okay.
We've got a lot of questions about SCOBY, so I'm going to stay with the SCOBY.
Yeah.
I'll stay with SCOBY, and then there's another area of questions as well. Does it make any difference if you use a large, thick SCOBY or a smaller, thinner SCOBY, or even more than one SCOBY?
You know, that was a big dilemma for me in the beginning. When I first started, I got a SCOBY and it was really small. And I thought, oh my gosh, is this going to work? And I used it. And it was the very beginning of my kombucha making. So, you know, everything was new. And I just had to figure out what seemed acidic enough for me. I had to trust my taste buds, and that SCOBY did just fine. I've always done a large jar. I've always done the gallon, not a half gallon, and it worked just fine. It might take a little bit longer for it to be the way you want it to taste, but the range is pretty much 7 days to about 3 weeks, 21 days. And I have always gone for a little more acidic. I like that sort of a little bit of a vinegary taste. And so I just wait until it feels to me like I've got that balance of the sweet and the acidic. But some people don't want too much of that vinegary taste, and so they're ready at 7 days.
Great. I'm going to switch over to equipment for
Oh,
a little bit.
let me go back to that question
Sorry.
really quickly. Dorina, let me go back to answering more about that question, because the person wanted to know is, could you use two? And yes, it's just perfectly fine if you have two small ones that you want to use instead of one bigger one. There's nothing wrong with that. And I also want to assure you, there's nothing wrong with Hello? Is that okay, Dorina?
Yep, somebody had their microphone on.
Okay. So I also want to assure everyone, and I want to make sure you can see this. It's perfectly fine if the SCOBY is floating around in your jar. It doesn't have to be flat and on top. Sometimes it's on the side. Sometimes it goes down to the bottom of the jar. Sometimes it does just stay there. So I would say that you don't want to fill your jar so high. Let me go back and get that other jar. You can see the SCOBY floating around in there on top, and that's just fine. If you go too far to the top, if you don't leave enough headspace, then you're going to get your SCOBY growing practically into your lid, into your paper towel. You don't want that. So just leave yourself at an inch or so, and the SCOBY will sit there, or it might go down the side, it might go down to the bottom. You can have one large one, you can peel it off, and you can have two small ones. It will be just fine. Whatever happens there, it'll be just fine. The SCOBY will grow, and the SCOBY will do its job, feeding off the sweetened tea, and creating the fermentation and becoming more and more acidic.
All right. Can I ask a few more questions, or do you want to?
Yeah, if you'd like to. Are they about SCOBY?
No, we're going to switch to equipment. And so there's a question about whether or not the equipment needs to be sterilized prior to doing this work.
Good question. I used to think that, but no, it doesn't need to be sterilized. It needs to be, you want your counters, you want your space, you want everything that you're using to be clean. I do wash my jars very carefully, lots of hot water. If I use my dishwasher, then I run them through my dishwasher, but I have a bottle brush and I use lots of soapy hot water and lots of hot water to rinse them. And then you can, if you want to, put them right in the dishwasher. But no, your materials don't have to be sterilized. Because this is my personality, I have dedicated kombucha equipment, but you don't have to. All of this equipment is just for kombucha for me. I don't use it for other things like making soup or anything else. But I just do that because I prefer to. Does that help?
I think so.
Okay.
And there are more questions on the starter and SCOBY and other. And I think we're still a little, I say we because I think I'm in this camp as well, a little uncertain about the starter liquid. You said we could buy a unsweetened version at the store and use that as our starter liquid.
Yeah.
What are other options?
You make the starter liquid it comes from your first fermentation. So it's the sweetened tea. It's what comes from, excuse me, I'm right over here. It's what comes from this. This is your first fermentation. We just made this, okay? Now, I know that in my house, this will be about 2 weeks before I will take this off and I will taste it. And then I will have some to use for my starter, for my next batch. And also the rest of it, I will put in here or bottle it and flavor it. Okay, which is what we're going to do next. So maybe that will become clearer for you.
I think it's the ground zero, right? So I have never made kombucha before. Therefore, I don't have starter or SCOBY. So I would order the SCOBY online or find it from a friend, and I would find the starter from a friend or buy an unsweetened kombucha at the store and use that.
That is a way that can be done. You can do it that way. If you purchase the SCOBY online, it will come with starter. It will come with either a half a cup or a whole cup. And you can, and I have done it. I have purchased a bottle of, I think it's called GT Synergy Original. So it is unflavored. It is just the basic first fermentation that is bottled. And let's see, you saw me take the fermentation, I had some of that in here, and I used it to pour in here. This is the starter with the sweetened tea and the SCOBY. That's what's in here. And that's what's creating my first fermentation. So,
Great. Thank you, Margie. You are handling this barrage of questions, which is a good sign from all of these
I
participants.
understand.
Yeah,
Bring
it's
it
great.
on. I completely understand. And I think that some of the questions about the starter will come a little clearer as we do the next steps.
Why don't we go ahead and do the next step, and then I'll get the other
Okay.
questions.
Okay, very good. We will. So now this is a fermentation that has been sitting in my dark space on my counter since January 3rd. That was what it was labeled. It was labeled January 3rd. And so here's what I would normally do. I want you to see this. I'm taking my very clean little ladle and I'm going to put some of it in this glass and I'm going to taste it. It's so good. And it's a little bit effervescent, which is what I like. I can taste the bubbliness, the effervescence.
That's great.
It's definitely ready to become flavored. So now what I'm going to do is I like to strain my my first fermentation into a pitcher. And I usually do that at the sink. So you can see it. I'm going to go ahead and do it right here. You can see the color of it. You can see that it gets kind of bubbly. That's because it's got some carbonation. And you can also see, I hope you can see, that at the bottom of this jar, there's some stringy stuff. And that's going to go right in there too. The mesh strainer is going to capture that. And look at the bottom of the jar. I know you're thinking icky, but no, it's not icky. That's good. That's all good. And if you were doing what's called continuous fermentation, you would just go, you wouldn't even clean that jar. You would just put SCOBY back in there and you would put your starter liquid and your next batch of sweetened tea. But I don't do it that way. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to clean it later on. And here now I have a pitcher full of my first fermentation. For all of you who are trying to figure out what the starter is, that's what this is. The whole first fermentation could be used as starter. I'm going to take some of it and keep it as starter. Let me take my funnel and I'm going to pour it in here. Sometimes I do a whole bottle so that I have 2 cups of starter, and sometimes I do just a part of a bottle. So I'm just gonna do that. This is about a cup. I'm just gonna do that for now. I might keep another cup. I want to make sure that I have enough to do these. So now I'm going to pour the starter into each of these bottles, and it won't be, I won't be using it as a starter anymore. Well, I'm using it, then I'm going to flavor it. And so that, the flavoring and also allowing some more carbonation, now it becomes a second fermentation. But that's what this is. This is all starter. I'm just gonna fill about halfway for each bottle for now. If you have any questions while I'm doing it, I'll answer them.
Okay. Let's see.
You have a timer going off out here. Do you need me to
Let
do
me-
something?
Oh, it'll
Let
go off,
me-
it'll go off by
let-
itself. Thank you.
Well,
Okay, sorry about that. Does the bottom of that jar be, okay, so you just showed us the bottom of the jar when you've poured out the first fermentation. Does that become the SCOBY?
No, the liquid does not become the SCOBY. The liquid is always the liquid. The SCOBY is that spongy mass that I showed you. Let's see. The culture is fed somewhat by the liquid, by the sweetened tea, but they're two separate things.
Mhm.
Okay. The liquid does not become the SCOBY.
Great, thank you. And then there was a few questions about the tea. Can you use any kind of tea, flavored teas, decaf tea, any guidance on the tea?
Very good question. Okay, it's a topic in and of itself. So I use black tea. What I have read is that not all black teas are the same. I use English breakfast. In the very beginning, when I was experimenting, I was sometimes using Earl Grey, but I found out that Earl Grey is a little too oily and it's not really the best tea to use. I know that it is recommended that you can use green tea. Now you'll note that green tea and black tea both have caffeine. You want the caffeine. The caffeine helps to feed the culture. So you don't want to use decaffeinated tea, and you don't want to use flavored teas. And I think that's pretty much a good general rule. This is the one that I buy at my local co-op. It's called Equal Exchange. It's an organic English breakfast tea. It doesn't have to be organic though. That's your choice.
Thank you. There was also a question about frequency of the fermentation. How often do you have to make a new fermentation? This individual does not, may not anticipate making kombucha on such a regular basis. Yeah, how does that work? How to keep the starter alive and keep it going?
Right. Okay. So you can keep your starter alive by just putting it in the refrigerator. I mean, you can keep it. We'll talk about like we're gonna do these bottles now, okay? And one of them I'm keeping aside as starter for my next fermentation. And as it happens, I'll probably do that in about a week, because I usually like to have mine be about a week apart. But sometimes if I've gone away, or if I went away for 3 weeks in December, and so I wasn't going to be making anything for a bit, and so I just took my my starter and I put it in the refrigerator. Okay, it will keep in the refrigerator for a long time. And your SCOBY will keep just fine in your SCOBY hotel. So whether you have 1 SCOBY or 5 SCOBY, you need to have a container for it. And I use this half-gallon jar. You can use something else. You can use, a glass cleaner, a glass, Pyrex dish, and it doesn't have to be round. But what I wanted to tell you is it will take on whatever shape the container is. So if you use a square one, it might turn out to take on the shape that it will be square. And that's not terrible, but it's just easier if you keep it in a container that's going to be more similar to the shape of the vessel that you're using, the jar. Now, some people use pottery, ceramic jars. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds, but I use this, glass jar, and my scobies are in this smaller glass jar, and so they stay the same shape. I have seen them when they've been square, and the thing that you can do, if you just take if you have a plastic container or a Tupperware container, and it's not round, then it so happens that all the ones I have here right now are round. So you could even keep your SCOBY in here, and with some starter liquid, make sure you want to have some liquid with it. And then instead of using this top, for example, you would just take some cheesecloth or some paper towel or some kind of a paper coffee filter, something to go over it, and then you use a binder. You don't want to seal it with this. But you can use something that you have in the house if you don't want to go out and get a jar. So I hope that answers your question. If you're not going to be making fermentations all the time and you feel like it might be a while, that's no problem. Just keep your SCOBY in a separate container, keep it covered properly and with a little bit of liquid. And then also if you have a jar of starter liquid, just put it in the refrigerator.
Great.
I think that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. Are there benefits to using bottles that are dark colored, or are clear bottles just the standard?
Very good question. That's a very good question. When I was doing my reading and research, and there was a lot online, I spent a lot of time reading and researching and watching videos, and there are people who recommend using darker bottles. So if you're familiar with some of those bottles, there's bottles like these that come in kind of a brown color. There are some people who use that. And then, like if you go to the grocery store and you look at the kombucha section, you're going to see that some are in this kind of a bottle, glass bottle, and some are in the darker bottles. And some people recommend that because they feel it's kind of like keeping the kombucha in a dark space. But I wanted the other thing that people recommend is a thicker glass bottle like this, and then this kind of a top with this lock action, allows you to really seal it well, and you get some carbon dioxide in there, some carbonation and everything, and so I like that. But I know other people who just use glass jars that they have, and they're perfectly happy with it. And so you don't absolutely have to go out and spend money on getting fancy jars. I looked around and I found right in Arcata, California, a store that carries bottles that were similar to this, but they weren't quite what I wanted. And the store owner did some research and found that she could order what I wanted from one of her resources. And so I was able to just buy them locally. You can also, if you want a jar like this, whether a bottle like this, whether it's the thick clear glass or the brown, you might look at a place where they sell brewing supplies, any place where they sell brewing jars and bottles.
Okay. Let's see. Lots and lots of interest in the SCOBY world. Do you need to replenish the liquid in the SCOBY container if it's being stored unused for a long period of time? And if so, how often?
Sorry, repeat that for me again. Do you need to replenish what?
The liquid that's in the SCOBY container, if it's being used, stored or unused.
That's the starter liquid. That's the starter liquid, or you could also just, if you have some sweetened tea, some leftover sweetened tea like I had in my pot that didn't go into my first fermentation, you can use that as well. Yes, you want to keep some liquid in there. There doesn't have to be a lot, but just enough to keep the SCOBY covered. Okay. See, there's just a little bit over the top on that one.
Okay, and I am finding some resources from UC Davis and Oregon State University for fermented foods and kombucha, so I'll add those in a moment.
Yes.
And
I just do want to remind you that if you're concerned about not having enough liquid from your own fermentation, then I will remind you that you can go to the store and buy a unflavored bottled kombucha and use that.
Great, thank you for that reminder. Let's see, there are questions here about the probiotics and the colonies of probiotics. I will lead them to Aaron DiCaprio's website on fermented foods.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to talk a little bit about that, but definitely there is a lot of research about the nutrition, the probiotic benefits and other benefits, but there's nothing very definite about it.
No, I think we learned that from Dr. Aaron DiCaprio of not recent.
Yes.
Recent past, I mean. How does this, there's a lot of information. So let me ask you this question. Are there videos or websites that you would recommend that I could send out to everybody after tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
There are many, but I'm just going to recommend 2 for now. And then when you're searching around, you might find some, that you like too. So one that I recommend, and Barbara Goldberg was the one that recommended it to me, is Cultures for Health. And that's where, if you go to their website, they have, if you need a SCOBY, they have the live black tea kombucha SCOBY with the starter tea. And it is a good website. It has a lot of information. And also right now, if you're needing that SCOBY and you want to start right away, right now, I don't know how long it's going to be on, they have a code, a free ship 2023 code, so that you don't have to pay for shipping. So I recommend that one. There's articles to read, there's recipes, there's lots about different fermentations. It's, I think, a very exciting place. As a matter of fact, things that I have read there have made me want to use kombucha for other things like salad dressings and also in other recipes. So maybe that could be another demonstration another time. Another one that I recommend is Kombucha Camp. And it's kombucha and then camp with a K, K-A-M-P. And I think they're a good, reliable resource as well. And I've seen them referenced. They were referenced in the handout that El Dorado County did. So they've been, I think, pretty well vetted.
All right, I'm putting up some resources as well. Oops. Let's see, let me find some more questions before the
Okay.
temperature range for the kombucha while it's fermenting. Can it be in an
Yes.
unheated area?
It needs to be in a moderately warm place. So I will tell you that the range that we recommend is, let's see, I want to make sure that I'm pretty accurate in this. So about 64 to 79 is what's recommended. That's Fahrenheit, and 18 to 26 Celsius. And it's going to be different in every place. I know somebody who keeps their fermentations in their pantry. They have a walk-in pantry that that has a pretty dark little space, and I've just always used this little space in my on my counter that's underneath a cabinet, and we have a pretty moderate temperature here where we live. So it rarely gets really cold here, and even when we have power outages, we generally put our generator on if we think it's going to be a long time. So we don't see a lot of a big range of hot and cold here. So even once we're not using our heat anymore, the temperature in the house and the temperature in the kitchen might heat up if I'm doing a lot of baking, or something, but it's always somewhere probably in that 65 to 70 range or something like that Fahrenheit. So yeah, you don't want it to be in extremes. You don't want it to get too hot. You don't want it to get too cold. So you have to find a place that's going to work for you.
Okay.
And also the temperature might impact how long it takes for your fermentation to be ready for you. So be aware of that if you do have changing temperatures in your house, and or if you have much warmer temperatures than where I live, your fermentation may take fewer days than mine does.
All right.
And that's about the acidity. That's about the pH level, the acidity. And I can say something about pH if you want. It is not recommended at all that you measure the pH or that you worry about it being, 2.9 or 3.1 or anything like that, because if you are not using a pH meter that you are calibrating every single time, then you don't know if you are getting an accurate figure. So it is it's recommended everywhere that I've seen that your taste buds are the taste test for what the pH level is and the acidity. So it's the acidity that tastes right for you.
Another SCOBY question. Is the SCOBY thrown out after you've used it for your first fermentation?
No, no, it is not. Let's see. So I've had these SCOBYs for quite a while. I have never had a SCOBY go bad. I have taken, sometimes I've had more and I don't really need to have that many. And so if I don't have somebody to give one away to, then what I do is I cut them up and I use them in compost, or I sometimes will directly mix them into some composted soil, and then I use them in the garden around plants that like some acidity, rhododendrons, azaleas, other things. So that's what I do. But no, you can use your SCOBYs for quite a long time. They do not go bad. they will, you see that some of mine are whiter and some of them are a little more caramel looking or butterscotch looking. Well, the reason that they get that little bit of browning or caramelized look is because of the sugar. And that's the only reason. There's nothing wrong with them. And actually, if you look at your scobies and they have like some brown strings on them or something, that's a good thing. So that's not a bad thing either. You can take them off or leave them on, but that's a sign that your SCOBY is perfectly healthy. You don't want to see mold. You don't want to see anything, like that. It's very obvious if that would happen. I've never had it. I'm very careful to keep things clean around the rim. I clean, and like for my SCOBY hotel, I will usually just take some vinegar on cloth and I wipe around the whole thing inside the rim and outside the rim. And when I handle my scobies, I try to remember to not wash my hands with water just before, but instead to dip my fingers in some either some kombucha or some vinegar, some apple cider vinegar or regular white vinegar. And that will help keep things nice and clean. But definitely your SCOBY can go on for a very long time. I have even heard people say that they have never had a bad SCOBY, and so they just pass them along, keep them in their own little garage, or I do know a few people who, like me, will eventually cut them up and put them in the garden.
Right. Let's
I
see.
hope that answers that. I think it takes a little while to have some experience with SCOBY to trust it.
Yeah. And then there's a couple of questions that are related, and then people are looking for that last bit where you add the flavor. Related questions are, how do you tell if the SCOBY and or the kombucha goes bad? And what does a healthy SCOBY smell like?
Yeah, it'll smell, the whole thing will smell a little bit like apple cider vinegar. Your first fermentation and your SCOBY, a little bit like apple cider vinegar. It's, but not, not extreme, but that vinegaryness is part of it. I've never experienced anything going bad. So I don't know if you see mold on your SCOBY, blue or black mold on your SCOBY, or if there is any in your jar or whatever, that I would probably say that there's a problem there. If you have done a fermentation, if you've done your first fermentation and you lift it off to taste it or to see how it is, and you see black mold or blue mold or anything on your SCOBY or on your jar, I would say that's not good.
And that's not good means throw it out, correct?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, don't mess around with mold. Yeah. Don't just peel it off and say it'll be okay. No, I would get rid of it.
Great, thank you. Do you want to go to the next step, and then I'll ask some more questions after your next step?
Yes, I think that would be a good idea. This is kind of the fun part, guys, because this is when you get to flavor your kombucha. And Dorina, do you have that photo I sent you with the strawberries?
I will get to it. Yeah.
Okay. So
all of
I
you
have a strawberry
watching.
patch. I'm
There
very
we go.
lucky that I have a strawberry patch. And so for about 6 months or so of the year, I have wonderful sweet strawberries, and especially certain months. I mean, will get quite a bit. I have plenty for flavor in my kombucha, and for sharing with neighbors, and for baking with and making jam and all of that. And I just love my strawberry kombucha. It is my favorite, I think. But during the winter months, I don't have my strawberries. And I prefer to use fresh rather than frozen, but frozen berries will work, by the way. So if you have a lot of berries, or any other kinds of fruits and things that you think you might want to flavor with, and you want to put them in the freezer and then use them out of the freezer, there's no problem with that. I don't know if the flavor will be any different. I just have always used fresh, but so you can use fresh fruit, you can use frozen fruit, you can use juice for your flavoring. I have used raspberries, which we will do tonight. It's another one of my favorite. I actually bought these so that I could show them to you, but I also use raspberries for my dog. So that's why I sometimes will have raspberries in the off season. And then also one that I've only recently done is pineapple. I've done pineapple kombucha, and tonight I thought we could also experiment with orange kombucha. In California this time of year, it's citrus time, and the citrus is just beautiful in the stores. There's Meyer lemons and all different kinds of oranges. I had hoped that I would find a blood orange, and that maybe we would do a blood orange, but I couldn't find one this week. So I will give you a recipe for flavoring with blood orange if you want to try it. And then I also chopped up some fresh ginger, and I did the rind of a Meyer lemon, and then this is some Meyer lemon juice, and I thought we would do what's called lemon ginger zinger. And actually, I think that I got that recipe from the Cultures for Life website, and they have quite a lot of good recipes on their website for flavoring. So we'll do orange, pineapple, the lemon, ginger, and raspberry. And if you have any questions along the way, you can ask them. So I will tell you that some of the things that are sort of basic for me is that I have learned through experimentation about how much fruit, how many pieces of fruit I like to put in to my bottles. And that's again, personal taste. So just like you have to trust your own taste buds. I might like to use 8 or 12 pieces of fruit, and that might be too much for you. And the same thing, I might want less ginger or more ginger, and you might, prefer it the opposite way. So it is a matter of taste. But besides using pieces of fruit, I don't know if you can see these. This is the raspberries, and what I do is I take a raspberry and just roughly cut it up into pieces. I always say about 1/4 of an inch, but it may be closer to 1/3 or 1/2 an inch each. It's okay. It's not a problem. And then I also had decided to experiment with a little bit of zest, orange zest, and also lemon zest today. And then I chopped up the ginger. It's just a rough chop of ginger. I think it's easier when you're starting out and you're experimenting to use some pieces that are pretty visible rather than grating the ginger. It's harder to control the flavor if you grate. And And then the same thing with the pineapple. This is a very fresh pineapple. I just cut it up and it's gonna be really sweet and good. And so this pineapple would be delicious in combination with ginger also. So that's something else. And so I've got some fresh orange juice here. I tend to like to use fresh, but it is totally allowable to use bottled juice, either bottled juice of your own making or bottled juice that you buy at the store. Or even I was thinking that when I cut up the pineapple today, it makes a lot of juice, and that pineapple juice from the fresh pineapple is really sweet. And you could even pour that pineapple juice off and use that in the bottling. So kind of a rule of thumb for these bottles are about 18 ounces. And I like to leave headspace of about that much. So you get up to the bottle and the shoulders start around here. So I usually don't go any higher than that. And that's for a couple of reasons. I feel like having a little bit more space gives me a little bit more of the carbonation that I like. There's other people that say that if you go up to here, you're gonna have better carbonation, but my experience has not been that. I'm always curious to hear what other people experience. So if you have some of your own experience to share, please chime in. But so I usually fill my bottles part way, and then I put my fruit in. And sometimes I do all the same. Sometimes, you know, maybe I would do all raspberry or all strawberry. But for our purposes today, I decided I would do different kinds. And so I'll just start with the raspberry. And I do tend to like I think I started out where I was putting about 8 pieces in, but now I'm putting in about 12. So I've just put 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth. So I'll put 6 more pieces in here. Okay, and okay, so that's it. Now I can fill this up. That's all I'm going to put in there. And so I will take my funnel. I usually will put all the fruit in at once, but for our demonstration purposes, I'm gonna do things a little bit differently. Okay, so now you can see I'm getting to the shoulders of and I'm gonna stop right there. So that's the headspace that it will have. And then I put the top on and lock it down. That one's done. And so now I think I'll do the pineapple one. And I started out again where I think I was doing about 6. So that's 6. Now I'm going to do 8 or probably 10, maybe 12. Now, one of the things I will tell you, and you might read this, is that there are people who believe that certain fruits and certain other things like ginger, vegetables that you might use, produce more carbonation. And that's, again, kind of an experiment. I do think from my experience that the pineapple produces more carbonation than the strawberries and the raspberries. And so I am very careful to open them up over the sink. So that's just pineapple. I'm gonna close it, okay? And now I think I'll do the lemon ginger. I've never done this one before, so you're seeing a first with me. And I'm going to put, they say the ratio of starter liquid in the bottle to the flavoring that you're using should be, you know, maybe about 2 ounces of the juice to, so this would be about 15 or 16 ounces of liquid, and this is 2 ounces right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it in. I think I'll do it over here, this one. That's the lemon juice is going in there. And I am also, I did some lemon rind from this nice Meyer lemon that I had, and I think I'm gonna put some of it in there. I think it'll help it be more stronger lemony taste. And now I'm also going to put in, can you see the
Don't do that.
ginger? Hello?
Yeah. Yes, you're fine. Yes, we can see
Okay.
it.
Okay, so it is suggested that you use about a half a teaspoon of ginger. Some people like to use a whole teaspoon. So I took teaspoons out for you to see, this is a half a teaspoon, this is a whole teaspoon. And I like ginger, but I don't want it to be super dominant. So I am just going to do what I think is about a half a teaspoon. And you can see that it's a rough chop. And I'm gonna put that in there. And now I'm going to fill it. I can already smell that ginger and the lemon. And you can see the color is gonna be different. Dorena, I think you have a photo of some
Okay.
bottles of kombucha that I sent you. And
I
some
do.
of the bottles, yeah, some of the bottles are more golden and some of the bottles are more red. And I wanted people to see that the color will change depending on what you're using. So in the picture that Dorena, I think, is putting up, some are pineapple and some are either raspberry or strawberry. And so the pineapple stays more golden and the raspberry and strawberry become this color. Okay, so that's my lemon, ginger zinger. And so we've got 3 done. We have raspberry, pineapple, lemon, zinger. And I think now we'll do some orange. I think I'm gonna do 2 that are orange. So this is about 4 ounces of fresh orange juice. And so I'm gonna put what I think is about 2 ounces in there. And then I'm gonna put the other 2 ounces in there. Okay. And I have some zest, which I'm going to add just to experiment. In recipes, do say that if you want to, you can add some sugar, like maybe a half a teaspoon of sugar per bottle, per this size bottle. And if you don't want to use a half teaspoon of sugar, but you want to use some kind of sweetener, you could use either honey or maple syrup. I just prefer not to, but maybe I will try it sometime. The half a teaspoon of sugar will not probably, it will make it a little bit sweeter. It also will feed the culture a little bit, so that can be a positive thing. And then again, I wanted to make sure that you know that you don't want to use like brown sugar or something like that. You just want to use either granulated or raw sugar. Nothing that has molasses in it. Okay, and so that's 2 orange. Not too hard, right? Now I'm thinking that maybe since I have enough pineapple and some leftover ginger, I'm going to do pineapple ginger. So I'm just going to go ahead and put all this pineapple in.
While you're doing that, may I ask a couple of questions?
Yes.
Thank you. It's about making the kombucha, or flavoring rather. Are any berries okay? For example, elderberries?
You know, I've never used elderberries, but I have a friend who uses blueberries. And I have heard of people using a mix of berries. I have a neighbor who lives up the street, and they have huckleberries and also some other berries. I think they're called Erewhons or something. And so they kind of sometimes will do a mixture. I don't think there's any problem with using. I'm not familiar with elderberries. I've not used them, but I don't think there would be any problem.
Okay. And what about extract for flavoring? Do you know anything about that?
You mean a bottled extract or something?
Yeah, good quality extract for flavoring.
Mm-hmm. I don't know anything about that. I've not read about that.
Okay.
No, I don't know.
Okay.
So I could do some research.
All right. And there was a question about the water that's used. Do you use tap water, distilled water, filtered water?
It's recommended that you use filtered water. And we have a filter on our sink, and so I can fill from that. I also know our water very well because we have our own well site here in our neighborhood. We have a very small water district. We are intimately involved with the water district. We know about the testing and all that, and our water is about as pure as it gets. And there is just the slightest little bit of chlorine that they use, and that's sort of like really because we don't really need it, but they do it for sort of extra protection. So that's why filtering is a good idea. And another thing that you can do if you're concerned about water is you can boil it for a while. You could, if you don't have a filter, you could boil your water for, I think it's 20 minutes. Then if you do that, then you're going to want to probably put in some extra water, because if you boil water that long, some of it's going to evaporate. But I go right from my tap or right from my filter. I boil it, I bring it to a boil, and then I add my sugar and my tea bags. So, and the opposite way works too, by the way. You can add your tea bags and then put the sugar in. You have to have both in there, that's for sure.
Someone was asking about the fermentation process. Does the kombucha become alcoholic? And what can you say about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there is a trace bit of alcohol, and I will tell you, it is recommended if you've not ever had kombucha before, that you sort of work your way up slowly. That's what I did. I drank maybe 2 ounces at a time in the very beginning. And this was before I was even making it myself, when I was buying it. But it's recommended that you maybe do 4 ounces at a time. I will say that I have zero tolerance for alcohol. I don't drink any alcoholic beverages and have not for a very, very long time. And I feel no effect. So it's got to be extremely low. I've never felt anything. Usually I don't drink more than 1 bottle in a day. But it is important that people know, in case they have health issues or preferences, that there is a trace amount of alcohol.
Great. And about how long can the bottled kombucha store, and does it need to be refrigerated?
Yeah, so what's going to happen with these is these are our second fermentations. They're flavored. They're going to build some carbonation, and I'm going to put them in that dark space on my counter in that little dark corner for anywhere from what's recommended is 1 to 3 days. If you like more carbonation, it is, suggested that you can go 5 or 6 days. Okay, and I very often leave mine on the counter for 6 days, maybe even 7, and then I put it in my refrigerator. Okay, and then once it's in your refrigerator, it stays there for quite a long time. So what I do also with the bottle that I designate as my starter, okay, I'm gonna say this is my starter, okay? I'm gonna put the top on and I'm going to label that this date, it's 1/19. And I'm gonna put that on the counter so it can develop a little bit more carbonation. And then after 3 days or 5 days or whatever, then I'm gonna put that in the refrigerator. But because it has this on it, I know this is my starter liquid. I can even write starter liquid on there if I want to, but it's gonna go in the refrigerator. You don't wanna leave it on your counter. If you will notice at the grocery store, kombucha is always in a refrigerator. So put it in the refrigerator and keep it for quite a while. I will tell you that some of your flavorings may still build more carbonation in the refrigerator. It should slow down. It should not build that much, but I find that sometimes they do. And so I just want to urge you to open your bottles over the sink. Just like, be careful with it, just like you would with any bubbly, any effervescent beverage.
So you don't burp them every few days before you?
No, you don't burp
Okay.
them. No, but you can burp before you open. I would still do it over the sink. I haven't had a lot of, overflow of foam and everything, but I have had it happen. And most recently, it has happened for me with the pineapple. I have had it happen sometimes with strawberry or raspberry, but rarely. And I guess we'll see with these other things. I'm kind of curious to see if the ginger creates a lot of carbonation.
And when you drink it, do you take the fruit out?
Okay, so let's do that right now, okay? This is how I do it. I'm going to open this over the sink.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to put, because it's 7 o'clock and I want people, if you will please share your feedback from today's demonstration. I'll put the link for the survey in the chat and ask you if you'll please give us feedback. It's a Google survey, so please let us know.
Okay, I want to answer one question. There was somebody who asked about water. I'll get back to that at the end. But first, I've set a glass on the counter. I hope you can see it. And I have a small mesh strainer. And so this is what I do. This is when you strain it, when you serve it. And so the strainer will collect any of the fruit if it falls, if it falls in. And isn't that beautiful?
That is. What
I wish that I was sharing it with all of
That's wonderful, Margie.
It's delicious.
Oh, that's great.
So that's a raspberry one. Because of the power outages that we had, I wasn't able to I wanted to have a few different kinds to share with you, but I wasn't able to make kombucha during all that power outage time. But I do want to tell, somebody had a question about the water. If you have extremely hard water, you may, if you have harsh minerals in a lot of minerals in your water, that may affect the taste for you. it may be that you will want to boil your water. Around here, we don't have problems with hard water. Our water is kind of naturally soft. People don't have water softeners here, or anything. And the taste of our water is just wonderful. It's about as delicious as you could ever want water to be. So, but I have lived in places where I've been aware of water being harder, where I've been aware of there being more minerals in it. So if that's the case, I just think that what you're going to want to do is make sure you use filtered water or boil your water for 20, 25 minutes. Or, I suppose you could use bottled water. I just don't like to recommend that. But anyway, so for those people who have water issues, I think you have maybe individual things that you would want to look at.
Okay.
Put down there, and that's it.
That's what I did before.
You know,
All right. Let me get that. Hold on. Oops, Margie, I accidentally muted you because I was trying to get someone else. So you might have to walk around. I apologize to unmute your device. At least it happened at the end of the presentation.
Okay, is that better?
Yes,
that
it
okay?
is. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank you for your excellent questions. And I hope that I answered them well enough to make you feel a little bit more secure about trying to make kombucha. I hope by seeing it, you see that there's no magic involved. There's, nothing mystical about it. There is some science to it, but it's not it's not too difficult. And I hope that you will try it and experiment with it and become as excited and enthusiastic about it as I've become, and then share it with other people. And
That's great.
yeah, it's a wonderful gift. I have a friend on this who, in my neighborhood, who I did teach her how to make it, but she's decided she would just rather come over here and get a glass from me.
Well, Margie, thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you all who attended. Please remember to provide feedback on the link that I've put up there a couple of times, and I will stop recording now. But if you have time, Margie, there may be additional questions.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that.